Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's Better on Draft.
Again, welcome everybody to episode 304 of the Better on Draft podcast. My name is Ken. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. We are back in studio, the Zoom studio. I am here with my co-hosts, starting with Dan. Dan, hello.
Hey, what's going on?
What are you drinking?
Going hard today. I've got a Partake Red.
All right. And speaking of going hard, Robert, what do you got over there?
Oh, I've got myself a little bit of a mixed drink, which basically is the Bundaberg ginger beer and a bottle of Kentucky 74. It's actually a non-alcoholic bourbon spirit.
Wendy, apparently we did not get the message to do some NA stuff. What are you drinking?
Well, I do have a 4.4% beer. It's the Banana Stand. Today's 13 beers of Halloween from Supernatural.
Awesome. And for me, I am drinking, from what I've gathered, a 2018 bottle of 4 Elf I picked up off the shelf. We're going to be talking about this bottle and others during the news segment. If you're listening via the podcast, of course, the news segment gets released on Monday, which will be the 24th, 2022 at 7 a.m. So stay tuned for that. You can find us on all of our social medias. That's Better on Draft on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Untapped, and now you can find us live 7 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/betterondraft or facebook.com/betterondraft. That's right, it's Better on Draft everything. I also have from the Missouri Brewers Guild their Missouri Loves Company, which is an alt beer brewed in collaboration by a bunch of breweries from their guild, so I am excited to have that. But with us in studio all the way from California, an afternoon show for him.
California? Welcome. Go west. Go west.
Did I say California?
West.
Hawaii?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, in Hawaii. It's all good.
Hawaii, that's all right. I've only been doing this for 300 some odd episodes. I'm still new. From Hawaii, Hana Koa Brewing. Jason, how are you?
Josh,
oh my God.
What are you doing?
I have Jason on the screen too.
Take the night off. Take the night off.
I am definitely not having a good day. I could just start it over and just be like, oh, nothing happened here. Everything was perfect. But you know what? I'm human. It's okay. Josh, how are you?
It's all right.
Welcome. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking Party Boy. It's our Pilsner. Basically, it's just a 4.2% rice Pilsner. There's a whole story behind it. If you guys want, I'll get into it later.
Well, let's kind of get into the beginning of the brewery. You guys are still fairly new in the game. You guys opened right before the world went to shit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you decided to open up a brewery out in Hawaii?
So I was born and raised on the island of Oahu, so that's where Waikiki is, Honolulu. And then I went to school in Northern California, like central, like Stockton. It's between Fresno and San Francisco. And I was doing finance and marketing. Ended up figuring out you didn't have to be 21 to make beer. So I started home brewing. And then after I got out of school, I realized I really liked it, got into the industry. And so I was working in the Bay Area as a brewer. And in 2016, I took over as head brewer where I was at in Pittsburgh, California. People always get it confused, but it's like super remote. And pretty much the space that we're currently in opened up. And so because of that, my dad and his business partner acquired it, didn't know what they were going to do. And I was like, oh, well, you can make a kick-ass brewery with a space like that as a joke. And then they came back and was like, do you want to do this? And I had just started dating our director of operations, now my wife, Chrissy. And she was working for Ballast Point as their rep in the Bay Area at the time for the North Bay and the East Bay. And pretty much told me like I'd never work with a spouse. And now here we are. But it was a fun time. It basically started off just like as a random idea. And then Chrissy and I moved from the Bay Area to Oahu in November of 2017. And then we were able to break ground on this space in December of 2018. And then in June of 2019, we actually had our wedding reception here. And to kind of put into perspective how like down to the wire it was, the reception was on a Saturday. On Wednesday, we got water. Thursday, we got power. Friday, the bar top went in. And Saturday, people danced on top of the bar. So, yeah. And
really
then just
cutting
opened
it close.
Yeah, it was a lot. I don't recommend people open a business, get married in the same year, and get their first place together in the same year. Or at least move into their first place together in the same year. Definitely a lot of changes at once, and then COVID happened, and it was, yeah, COVID was rough.
Well, let's talk about that for a quick minute before I pass it off to some of my co-hosts. So we actually had Kim Brisson-Lutz on the show about a month and a half ago, and she was talking about the change that they had to make, because when you're brewing for tourists, you're brewing different styles of beer, you're brewing for a different group. And with you over on Oahu, you've got about 1 million people in population there, but about 10 million visitors a year. How do you balance brewing for tourists versus brewing for the citizens of your island? How do you go about making those decisions of what works and what doesn't?
Whenever we're approaching stuff, we don't normally think of what is going to be attractive to tourists versus what's going to be attractive to locals. We've kind of just focused on the things that we want to do. We've really tried focusing on businesses and organizations that we want to collaborate with, whether it be for a beer that's going to benefit an outreach organization, or it's just a business collaboration so that we can share a visual space in the marketplace. That was a cool rhyme. So I think the difference is that with Maui Brewing having a population of a high amount of visitors, like Garrett's really talked about this, where they have a significantly greater amount of staples because they have so many visitors coming. And our business model, really, we only have 3 staples and we rotate a lot. And part of the reason for the rotation was because I felt like the teams that I was trying to build, or the team that I was trying to build, would have more fun being able to do all these different styles. We explore a lot of different things. And when it comes to tourism, we do have a high percentage of tourists that come in, but we do have a high amount of regulars as well. And being on Oahu, my goal has really been, especially with some of the changes that are happening locally, to try to make it so that the purchasing power of people that live here is greater than the people that are visiting here. So that, I just personally feel like you have a stronger business when you have a greater local population, because with COVID, what it taught us was that, we can't rely on tourism. Things can go wrong, and, you have to be able to pivot on a dime. Sorry, was that a little convoluted, or?
No,
that was great.
That's perfect.
Oh.
I noticed, because if you look at your entire tap list right now over on your website, the words collaboration and the words benefit kind of pop up nearly every single brew that you guys do. And there was one that caught my eye. I don't think it's currently on tap, but it was the Shoots de Boots. What kind of beer? Yeah. What kind of beer was the Shoots de Boots, and why was it important for you guys to brew that beer?
So Shoots de Boots was our Pink Boots beer for Pink Boots Society, which, I mean, I'm sure most listeners know too. It's an organization that works towards giving women in the beer industry opportunities, whether it be on the production side, front of house side, or other office positions and whatnot. And so Yakima Chief does their blend every year. And so part of it is that you do this beer and then you donate the proceeds towards Pink Boots. And so it's a fun beer because the blend is always different. So we've kind of taken that blend and trying to do it as a hazy annually, just because it kind of tends to lean more towards that tropical fruity, not as much of a dank profile. And what's really great is that our lead brewer rocks, basically like my right hand person. It's funny, our icons on the computer we share, I'm Dr. Evil and she's number 2 with the eye patch. But she's actually the chapter president of Pink Boots for the state of Hawaii. And she, for that day, she organized a huge, basically it ended up being a party. It was something like 40 women in the brewery while we're doing this collab beer. And it was like, oh, wow. Like it really was a crazy turnout. And considering how small Oahu is and the fact that we even had people flying from out of town, some of the people that work for Kona came out. We actually had, I don't know if you guys have heard of Ghost Town Brewing out of Oakland, California, but they had some people that were out here, and Justin, who's there, is a good friend of mine too. So it was kind of funny. They were like, Justin told us you would like this one. It's their All Nelson IPA. I was like, oh, fuck yeah. So swearing's okay, right? We can swear on this? Okay, cool.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. You can swear.
So speaking of Pink Boots, I actually had the opportunity to try your guys' beer at the Beers Without Beards Festival in Maine.
No way.
Yeah. So, we fell in love, my friend and I did. So I just wanted to ask how you guys ended up in Maine, of all places, in like March.
So Hop Culture had posted about it, and Chrissy just kind of like, on a whim commented on it being like, this looks really great. Like, that's awesome. Like from the Hana Koa page. And our friends at Around the Horn, out of like basically right outside of Yosemite, they commented below being like, you should invite these guys. And so then Hop Culture reached out and was like, hey, do you guys want to participate in it? And it's funny because Around the Horn's actually coming out next week for a collab. So yeah, it was like a cool, like, oh wow, we're gonna be invited to this festival. And then it kind of set in like, holy shit, how do I get beer to Maine? And so I figured out a lot, and it surprisingly worked out really well. I basically found a connection to overnight beer to LA, and then set up a truck to get beer out to Maine, and then working with the distributor and trying to figure out all the TTB rules and the Maine rules and getting all that. And after that, I was like, okay, well, if we could get beer to Maine, I think we can get beer everywhere else if we needed to for any reason. But it's been fun in that sense, because it's almost especially at that time too, because there's challenges of shipping with snowstorms and all this. But just go to that festival for anybody else who might have gone that's listening. That was the best festival as a vendor. All the guests were awesome. Nobody was like a high ABV chaser. Like nobody was like, oh, is that the girl beer or anything like that? And, even just the organization of the event. I mean, the person that put it on, she had cleaning kegs on site. If anything needed that with PBW and whatnot, they had a draft tech on site. So if anybody ran into problems, it was funny because we were supposed to have a jockey box there, but they couldn't source them. So they had these weird homebrew taps, which I'm sure, Wendy, you saw at some of the booths. But so what we did was we made a random connection with Oxbow, and Oxbow lent us their jockey box. And then the dude also was like, you guys like weed? I was like, oh yeah. And he's like, all right, here you go. Welcome to Maine. And I was like, sweet. So then what I ended up doing during the intermission of between sessions was rolling joints for like some of the other breweries, and then the festival organizer, I gave her one that was like this long, just being like, hey, thanks for everything. But yeah, and then I don't know, it was a really good vibe. Everybody was really cool, and I just love the aspect of a festival where it was like, hey, this is a safe space. There was a really good reporting system, and everybody was just really positive with each other, and it wasn't like a hype beast show off sort of thing. And I feel like some parts of beer culture have really taken the sneakerhead culture and taken it to a different level. And those are some of the extremes. But I like this and what it's growing into as far as like hey, this is what things could be like, and this is hopefully where they're going to end up. So I don't know. Sorry, that might have been a little long.
No, that's okay. I totally agree with everything you said about the festival. As somebody just going to enjoy the festival, I really enjoyed it. A lot of the same aspects that you were talking about. we did fall in love with the Party Boy pills, so I can't wait to hear that story because I've actually heard it already. But I think Dan had some questions.
Yeah. So first off, Josh, I got to say I love your brewery. I actually got referred to your brewery a few months ago when I was out there by the brewer of Broken Boundary. I had no idea where to go. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, go check these guys out. I will say your parking sucks. So maybe because I don't know the area, but basically walk down an alley after parking at somewhere else. But got to say, absolutely love it. You make, especially your Baltic Porter is amazing. But that brings me to the question that I have. Yeah, the Thunder Horse was probably my favorite Baltic Porter that I've ever had, in all honesty. Yeah. But anyway, so I was out there during the height of COVID. And, Hawaii was really, had a lot of restrictions, a lot of rules in place. What did you guys do to stay in business? I know a lot of places struggled out there. There were a lot of issues even when we were there. Can you talk to us about what you did to get through that?
Yeah, I mean, so the first shutdown started in March, and we went to just doing to go only with crowler fills. And we quickly learned that wasn't going to be able to keep us afloat, especially just like immediately opening. And it was a pretty decent investment to open. So we actually picked up a canning line from Micro Counter, who's actually out of Michigan. Great manufacturer for any brewers listening if they're looking for good solutions. But we started doing cans in June, and we were allowed to reopen with restrictions, and that was going pretty well. And so we started trying to do more frequent releases. And we had another shutdown happen at the end of August 2020. And that one was probably the most crippling. I mean, for the month of September, like, I wasn't paying myself. Like, basically everybody was laid off at that point. And then we were allowed to open in October. And we basically came to the conclusion that whenever we had a new beer release, we saw an increase in business. So from then on up until now, we've only had 2 weeks since then that we haven't had a new beer release. And that basically was the start of the whole business model of having new things always come out and really trying to just keep people excited about what's going on, because we found, I personally feel as though that the market has gone to somewhat of a what have you done for me lately? Or it's like Netflix, where it's like you open it up and there's a new show. And so there's incentive to be like, this is new. I haven't seen it before. So that's kind of where that business model came from for us. And then as 2021 came up, and just keeping up with the rules, with all the restrictions, that was incredibly stressful, where it would be like, you can do this. Okay, now you can't do this. And then going back and forth and back and forth. And I'm just really grateful that now those aren't things that we have to worry about. I mean, we also had at one point what was called the vaccine passport. So you had to be able to show your proof of vaccination so people could come in. And I mean, we were having people say you should just not do it and protest it because that's what a good business does. And I was like, you know what, man, I'm really just trying to keep people employed. That was the main goal, and trying to make sure that we could keep everything going. And Chrissy, being a wizard on social media, had actually been able to talk to these people and then eventually inviting them to come in for a beer and have conversations about it. And so it was really interesting to kind of see her work that type of, wizardry or witchcraft at that point to make that work. But I mean, I think a lot of people who didn't work in industries that were had restrictions during COVID, like, had a harder time understanding why certain things were the way they were. And it was pretty apparent with some people.
Yeah, I definitely saw that when I was out there. People having meltdowns in the hotel because they were asked for their COVID vaccination card when you couldn't even get to the island at that point without it. That's an interesting point you brought up about the releases. That was actually happening. I was there. I'm like, oh, I guess we came on a good day. I didn't know it was weekly. Do you find yourself releasing the same types of beer every so often now because of that? Or are you constantly coming up with new ideas?
No, we continue to try to come out with new things. We've actually, as of recently, we've also tried figuring out what our schedules should look like as far as releases. So it's not like, for an entire month, all you came out with was an IPA. And the thing I'm most passionate about are lagers. And with Party Boy being a staple lager now, it's given us opportunities to do special projects around those. And even with IPAs, we really try to focus on never using the same hops in the beers that are coming within like the next 6 weeks so that we have variety. Also for the hazies, especially changing out the yeast as well. So we do different runs on different yeast to create different profiles based on seasonality. And then also to trying to make sure that our board is pretty diverse, that we can fill the malt category, the dark beer category, sour, experimental, the IPA, and then our staples and just some other random ones that we really want to do. And it's stressful. And what I'm really grateful for is that, now I have a team behind me with very different philosophies and different experiences, and we can all collaborate and give opportunities to each other to do their own beers or like create special projects so that we can have better innovation. Whereas during COVID, it really was all on me. And I essentially worked in a vacuum where asking front of house what they thought, not getting a brewer's perspective of like, I think you should go in this direction and this is the technique to use kind of thing. So I've always been the type that I want other people's perspectives to get a greater picture. And I think now with this business model, it's considerably less stressful to do.
That's amazing. I actually love hearing that because I always worry. I hear that you're going to be releasing something every week. All right, now 3 weeks from now, it's going to be the same beer again, or say a month from now. You know what I'm getting to, because you do see that with a lot of places. Now, do you do any barrel aging there or not as of yet?
We've done some barrel aging. We did it on a budget. And the way we did it was, and a lot of people can do this too. So a lot of restaurants or bars will do barrel select programs with distilleries, primarily like in the bourbon industry. And, when you get your barrel select, you also get the barrel that it was from. So we would make these agreements where, hey, give us the barrel. We'll see if we can fill it, if it's still usable, and then do something with that. And that was kind of cool. We've done a couple things with that. This for 2023, the big goal for it is actually building a barrel program. And we're working on it right now too with there's a rum distillery in Central Oahu called Kohana Rum. And so we're working with them on what we can do there. And so I'm really excited. I'm hoping to really start moving into barley wine and doing our Imperial Stout and going with that. And have you guys ever heard of Private Press out of Santa Cruz, California?
I haven't. No.
They have a really cool business model with their barrel aged product where it's either just the barrel aged beer with blends, or there's one ingredient like cacao, coffee, or vanilla. And it's very much beer focused as far as the flavors that are driven. So I'm really hoping to build that with what we're doing. The other thing too for our barley wine is we've kind of got, the aspect of rum. We've got one t-shirt that was like a Skull Island. So the malt that we're going to be using for our barley wine is crisp Chevalier malt. And that was the predominant variety of barley during the 19th century into the early 50s. And so the goal is, well, this is what pirates probably would have had if they had gotten anything like this. And it's kind of a cool malt from what I've experienced. And so the goal right now is to also kind of look at, well, what were the ingredients that were being traded throughout that time? What was also coming to Hawaii at that time, and trying to recreate or bring back like historical stories or like create storylines throughout all of that with these ingredients and make something that's got a lot of meat to it rather than just like, here's some extra syrup for you with booze. But honestly, there are a lot of barley wines out there that are doing that. It's crazy. It's its own technique. Even with the Imperial Stouts, there's a lot to learn and a lot you can do with it. I've done stuff where it's been like the pastry stout, and I've seen a lot of other things associated with it. It's not necessarily what I would choose to do all the time, but there have been ideas that we've had that have worked. Like we did Teddy Grahams and a lot in like cacao, vanilla, and some other stuff, and it was really cool. But personally, that's not necessarily what I want to do. But whenever we are looking at doing things, I also look at, well, what does the public actually want? Because, I might be here being like, what do you mean you never heard of Led Zeppelin? And they're just like, no, I only listen to T Swift. So that's the thing to kind of keep in mind, I feel like, is, my philosophy on the brewers, on what we make here are, we have beer that pays the bills, we have beers that feed the hype, and then we have beers that feed the brewers' souls. So those special projects that we get to do as brewers is what we want, and to excite people is what we're going to try to focus on for 2023. And even our marketing team has been like, yeah, we can get people excited about that if you guys are excited about it.
That's great. Now, speaking of barley wines, I'm going to pass it over to Rob here. That happens to be one of his favorite styles.
Oh, man. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, it is definitely one of my favorite styles. I actually just had a Bottlelogic Arcane Rituals not too long ago, and that still is still my number one. But basically, I want to get into a couple of things here. Recently, I just saw that Hana Koa won a medal for, I guess, the bronze medal for Best Brew Pub in the 2022 Haliaina Awards. I was curious, what does it mean to you winning an award while only winning that award where it's I guess basically it's an award that has been given out for decades, and you guys winning that award after only being open for just under 3 years?
I mean, it's cool. It's really reassuring that, we don't advertise to vote for us for any of those local things. And it all just comes from people that are subscribing to that magazine or not magazine, but subscribing to those voting abilities, I guess. And so it makes us feel really good that it's like, hey, we're doing something right. People value what we're doing. And without us trying to advertise it, we are getting the recognition. And I mean, locally, those are awards that really help as far as getting people excited about stuff. I mean, I'm sure you guys know it just finished, but the things that as a brewer, the things I want to get are GABF and World Beer Cup.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, the local awards are really cool. Honestly, Hawaii is interesting because we're so removed and remote that those awards, like, yes, they do mean something at the local level, and that's great. But like one of the restaurants that we sell into, and they are awesome people, it's Fete. They just won a James Beard Award for their restaurant. It's a French-American continental cuisine, but it's 85% farm to table. And Robin, who is the chef, she's the first Native Hawaiian to win the award in 19 years, and it was basically the Pacific Award. So it was a big deal. And I think one thing I appreciate about that is that a lot of people don't realize there are a lot of things going on in the middle of nowhere, because let's be honest, Hawaii's in the middle of nowhere. But it is something where as much as we win these local awards, a lot of us really do want national recognition, because we want to prove that, we're not just, a place to go to vacation. It's like we're doing a lot out here, and we're trying to do a lot. So,
and I know that you guys submitted a beer to GABF. What did you guys submit?
We submitted 5 beers. We did Party Boy, our Pilsner, Rooftop, which is our staple pale ale, an IPA for American IPA, and then we went into hazy IPA category as well. And then we did International Dark Lager with our take on a Schwartz beer. And we didn't medal anything. And we haven't gotten the results back as far as feedback. I mean, the one thing that did happen that was kind of cool is we entered Alpha King. You guys have heard of that, or?
Alpha King, isn't that the Three Floyds?
Yeah, so Three Floyds puts on a competition during GABF with Yakima Chief Hops, where it's basically the beer has to be minimum 60 IBUs. Other than that, it just can't be a barley wine. So I'm sorry, Rob. But yeah, it's minimum that. And so Radiant Beer got gold and got the Alpha King crown. But we were we made the top 20, and I was actually at first I was kind of like, oh, whatever, but then I was like, actually, that's not too bad because it's 150 entries and it's single and double competing against each other. And I mean, you look at the list and it's like we're next to like Russian River and Bear Brewing and some other spots that are doing cool stuff. And so like a lot of the times with those awards, it's trying to figure out, well, where do we stand in comparison to other people and what can we do to improve our processes so that we're more competitive in that sense. And I mean, honestly, awards don't necessarily mean your business is going to be successful, but from a pride standpoint and a competitive standpoint, it's what a lot of brewers that I tend to talk to like really strive for, because it's that recognition and reassurance that it's like, yes, you won, like you did it, you're good.
And there's a lot of breweries that are out there, some that we have spoken to that we have asked about, and I knew that dog was going to do that. Kamina, lay down. That there were going to be, that there's breweries out there that have won, and we've asked, was like, hey, how's it feel to win? You guys want to win again? And I kind of, what I half expect is for people to kind of have that Super Bowl mentality, is that, the greatest thing about winning is trying to win again. But it feels like sometimes I don't really get that. And, obviously just like you and many other breweries that want to win, I guess for you, I guess have that show, bring out that imagination. Like if you won, would having that pride, would that then like validate everything and then just, okay, I got one, I'm good? Or do you just want to keep on winning?
Oh, I'd get addicted really quick. I mean, so just to kind of back up a little bit. So Hana Koa Brewing Company, the meaning, or Hana Koa, the way that we translate it for our business, because the literal translation doesn't work for Hawaiian, but it's continuously working towards our craft. So the aspect of hearing like, you did everything right, you got it, is like, okay, we did. Let's keep going. Let's keep winning this. Let's keep winning this. Let's go. Like, what else can we do? I mean, honestly, if there was a beer that we got a medal for and we won, yeah, there's a chance I'd be like, yeah, let's do this one again and see if it wins again. But there's also a chance I'd be like, well, let's do something different and see if we can win again. And let's just try to keep doing that and try to just keep being experimental, trying to find new innovations, trying to find ways to improve our processes. Because I feel like, there are a lot of breweries that really boomed in that 2000s, and the business model was just like, here's our staples and that's what we do, and that's all that you're going to get, really. And you look at them now and it's almost like, yeah, some of them are nationally distributed. And I'm not talking about anybody that's in Hawaii, but somebody that's in the mainland. And it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, I feel like as a brewer, you get complacent and you just go through the motions. And I don't want that for any of my staff, because I feel like if you're not growing, you're dying. And it doesn't mean you're growing by expanding your production or your footprint on stuff. It's growing from like what you're doing on the quality side. And that's always been the focus here. We're not trying to just put tanks in and go as big as we can. It's like, we're going to grow as long as it takes to get to a certain production without changing the quality at every step.
You made mention of two different things, and I feel like they're a little bit contradictory, because you're talking about creating your flagships, your beers, the beers that are your mainstays, but also you've mentioned that you're constantly pushing the envelope. You're bringing in new beers every single week. And for someone like me, when I go to a brewery, obviously I want to try new things, but in the same sense, there are times where I want some level of consistency. I want to go to you and have, the beers that you're known for, and not hope that they're on draft or I have to wait another, 6.5 months before they're coming back. And I follow this up because I've always said that the craft beer drinker is so, they don't. Disloyal, yeah. They don't follow they're just looking for the new hot, whatever they could check into Untapped next. How do you balance, like, again, you said you have beers for you, beers for them, hype beers, all this stuff, but how do you really balance that as a brewer, and I guess someone who wants to probably, you probably want some consistency in your life?
Yeah, I mean, so the three staple beers that we have are Party Boy, and then Rooftop, our pale ale, and then our blonde ale, which was called Break Time. I think we're rebranding it to Unbreakable. The whole story was we had a host that a tree actually fell on her head, and she's actually okay. But because of that, she lost her athletic scholarship. So we're using that beer to try to fund the rest of her schooling. But yeah, so those three beers, like originally we weren't intending to always have any staples, but the blonde ale and rooftop were really popular when we had opened. So we kept those going. In 2022, we basically brought Party Boy into the mix. And what we found with our outside sales program as it expanded to more restaurants rather than craft beer focused places was that they were looking for the same thing. They wanted, I can always get it, it's always available. And we felt like with those beers and the price points we could offer, we were competitive with what else is being offered. And with our IPAs and our hazies, I just always feel like I wanted to do those as rotating so we could constantly experiment with new hop varieties, either ones that we haven't used or ones that we've gone away from. So the goal for our in-house stuff is to always have the styles consistently represented, but then have a different beer. And we've thought about should we do a staple IPA, because there might be some regulars that want to just be able to rely on that and know maybe I don't see any appeal in these new ones that came out, and I can always fall back on this one. And really the only reason we haven't done that with IPAs, I mean, part of it is because I contracted a shitload of different ones, but the other side of it too is that I feel like if we go and do a staple IPA, we could lose the appeal for our rotating stuff. And we would have to change the production volume significantly, and it would make it more expensive. Does that make sense? Kind of as far as the personal reasons why we don't do that?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And one of the things that I've had to come to terms with as a craft beer fan, is that one, not every there are very limited breweries that will not, I don't want to say cater to me, but cater to the person who doesn't like IPAs. Right. So if I walk into something and I've learned I need to accept this, somewhere like Maine Beer Co., where 7 out of their 8 taps are going to be some type of IPA. It's perfectly fine. I understand it. That's what people go to Maine Beer Co. for. It's not what I went there for, but that's what people go there for. But for a brewery, I want to see a decent amount of options, which I think you're providing to everyone by making this, but I think it also feeds into the disloyalty of the craft beer customer, because they're going to expect that now. They're not expecting your standards. They're expecting new shit every single week or every other week that they come in. And I was just curious your thoughts on, having to deal with that kind of customer, because I feel like that is a big mainstay in craft beer right now, is that what can I check into Untapped that I've never had?
Yeah, I think, that whole thing of what have you done for me lately, I don't think it's going to be going away. And I think it's just kind of penetrated the culture in the United States in general for a lot of things. And so that's why it's so prominent across the board. I mean, at times it does sound nice where it's if we did have staples and that's mainly what we focused on, it would be considerably easier for us to focus on those from a production standpoint, but it wouldn't make us as relevant to the population that is coming in here, for the aspect of it is always fresh and new and different sort of deal. And I mean, really with Rooftop, our pale ale, I don't know how it got to be so popular, especially with the outside sales. But it is a beer that all of us as brewers like, and we do have regulars of that sometimes like just what they get. And I don't think I'm ever going to get rid of that. And if somebody's ever like, "Oh, are you going to do a rotating pale ale?" I'm going to say no. You should have rooftop, because that beer is actually probably the most like mushy love story beer that we have on. I don't know if you guys want me to go into the story. I don't know what the time frame is like, but if you want the story, I'm happy to share it.
We got time. Go for it.
So Wendy is in approval, so she wins by majority. Go.
Okay. So basically rooftop, so this whole idea for the brewery came up in the summer of 2016. And when my now wife and I started dating, we would climb up to her rooftop in the Bay Area and watch sunsets and kind of sit on the roof like workaholics. And we were always drinking Grunion Pale Ale from Ballast Point, which is Mosaic and Calypso. And, we would have a lot of really intimate conversations and really got to know each other a lot up there. And so when we were looking at what we want to do as a pale ale, I was like, well, let's call it rooftop. It means a lot. It's the aspect of I feel like whenever you're on a rooftop or you're at like the top floor of something, it almost seems like, the sky's really the limit. And so we kind of put a tagline on there that says, "This beer's for the dreamers." And, the label is actually right here. So this is actually the can label. So it's basically Chrissy and I sitting on top of the brewery, which a lot of us actually do. You can go on top of the roof at Hana Koa if you guys came out to visit. I would take you up there. Customers don't normally go up there. But so it was kind of my love letter to that time that we had together, where it's it's heavily hopped with Mosaic, a lot of different Mosaic products actually. And then it's just Pilsner, Vienna, caramel, and then there's a little bit of Equinaut T90 and Equinaut Cryo Hop in there. They give it a little bit more of a dank sort of green mango aroma as well. And it's one of my favorite beers. And a lot of it just has to do with the fact that it's because anytime we make that, it's a reminder of, those rooftop conversations. And it's grown to be a lot of different meaning for a lot of people that we've met along the way. And part of our beer training program with our staff is that, end of the day, after going through all the beers, it's having a 10 ounce of rooftop on the roof. So, yeah. Sorry, that was long, but
that's okay. I actually had Wendy, you had something?
I was just going to say I'm a sucker for a good story. So,
I think we all are.
Thanks.
We all are. I had a question just in terms of just overall volume in Hawaii. Now, I believe I heard that there are right now like 27 breweries that are in the state, but that number had doubled in the last few years. I'm curious, like, how much room do you think there is to expand before Hawaii is oversaturated? I mean, how many breweries you think the state can handle?
Well, so right now, I think on Oahu there are roughly, 12 breweries, and there's a couple that are planning to open up. And then Outer Islands, there's a lot that are kind of popping up as well. I really don't know what the saturation point is right now, because a lot of the breweries that are fairly established are mainly on with distributors. We're self-distributed, and they've hit grocery stores. They're throughout the island chain. There's one brewery that's actually now planning to open up a 30-barrel production facility. That's Honolulu Beer Works, and they did 5,000 barrels on a 7-barrel system in 1 year, and that's pretty remarkable. But I feel like the saturation point comes when so many people have opened up, and it's almost as though if you're not relevant to the customer, then that's really when you're going to start to see breweries either scaling back or closing down. And I'm not sure what that point is for Hawaii. Personally, I actually want more breweries in the area that I'm in, because whenever a new brewery has opened up in the area we're in, we've seen an increase in business. And I think the more in Hawaii that we can promote having local businesses and local breweries, the better off we're all going to be, because it decentivizes mainland companies from distributing out here. We have heavy distribution from, like Modern Times is a pretty big distributor out here, or a pretty big brand out here, or at least was. And then Sierra Nevada, but Sierra Nevada can distribute wherever they want out here. I love Ken Grossman. So I'm cool with that one. And then like New Belgium distributes out here heavily. So a lot of the bigger regional breweries come out here, and then some of the West Coast breweries as well. But, I don't think Hawaii's still fairly young as far as its craft customer. I like to think like we're always usually like 5 years behind in a lot of stuff. The joke is that you'll hear something on the radio here that was playing 8 months ago when you're in California, and it's new out here before the internet and like Spotify and all that, and you had to LimeWire shit. That was kind of what it was. My sister lived in the Bay for a while, and I'm like, what song is this? She's like, you haven't heard this song? And then I go home and then LimeWire, download it, and then 6 months later it's on the radio. I'm like, the fuck is this? But yeah, so I don't know. It's interesting because I actually look and see what's happening in the mainland to try to predict where things are going to go out here, because it kind of just always follows that.
Well, it's pretty obvious that Hawaii has a lot to offer. What do you think it is that is making Hawaii's beer scene kind of thrive right now?
Honestly, I think there's a lot of local support, and I think the aspect of being able to see who's producing it and that connection is really where people are gaining a lot of that fulfillment. One thing I like kind of think about is, you see all these Netflix documentaries about restaurants and how when you go to visit there, you want to try that restaurant, and you might realize like, well, have I done that with my local restaurant? Or like, do I know these people? Is this something I can connect to? And I think that's a lot of where breweries have an opportunity, because I mean, we do a lot of outreach, we have opportunities to do these different events and be available in the public and be like, you can literally come and visit us. And whether it's tourism or just the local population, I think people really do want to have a genuine connection to something. Like you want to buy into it. It's not like, the 90s where it's a faceless brand. It's, now you really have to be a stronger representative for what you're doing. I don't know. That's some dumb. I don't know.
No, that makes sense. So yeah. I am a big traveler. I do at least one beer trip a year out of state. Why should I come and visit your brewery?
Well, you can come hang out on the roof, and we'll hang out in the back and we'll play bocce keg. But if you were coming out to Hawaii, like it's a really unique place in the world. Hawaii was its own country, and there's so much history behind that. There is a feeling and a vibe with everything that's happening out here. I mean, you can go to Waikiki, which is going to be a mix of Miami and the Vegas Strip, like as far as that type of atmosphere. Or you can go out to the complete country and really kind of see like, this is that sort of relaxing moment sort of deal. And frankly, the food out here is awesome. The people out here are great. And if you were to come down to this brewery, like you kind of get to see a lot of different aspects of how we built community. There are Easter eggs that are hidden throughout the brewery. I'm a huge Marvel and Star Wars nerd, so I like to try to build Easter eggs into everything. And then, just honestly, the beer is fucking good. Like I don't like to boast a lot, but if I have to sell it, that's how I'd sell it. It's like, it's fucking good beer, and you're not going to waste your money trying it. And then, just the people that work here too, like everybody's really nice. We actually just did a hazy where on it does incentivize. It basically says like, ask your bartender ask our bartenders which tiki bar, or like ask our staff which tiki bar you like to go to, because we made basically a tiki style hazy just with dry hop and thiolized yeast and all this other stuff. Turned out great. But yeah, and trying to make it where it's like it's interactive, and rather than being like, this is what TripAdvisor told me to do, it's like, well, this is what my server told me I should go check out, and it's not really listed anywhere, and you check it out and it's like, oh shit, this was a hidden gem. So yeah.
As we go to the end of the show, we like to ask one final question, each of us, to end the show on a high, happy, hoppy note. So we're going to start with Dan. Dan, what's your final question here for Josh?
Yeah, so you've made a lot of beers with all the releases. What's one style of beer you haven't made yet that you're looking forward to trying to make?
We've done one barley wine. I'm really excited to do barley wine, but if there were ever an opportunity, I would love to do like spontaneous lambic and go through that whole thing. I've actually talked to another brewery where we would call the beer co-lambic and try to do something like that.
And is trying to persuade you into making an alt beer.
Oh, I would love to make alt beer. I love alt beer. I've homebrewed alt beers. I've had the alt beer I made as a homebrewer was called Minor Alterations. Yeah, bazinga. No, alt beers are great. We're actually going to be doing a Kolsch with Cologne malt with some friends here in a little bit, and it'll be with Nelson and Sabro hops.
I might have to wait for our little gift from you until that Kolsch, because I'm definitely a big fan of Kolsch. Rob, what's your final question?
So my final question, if I have this correctly, I believe Chrissy does not have your last name.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something that we have in common, is that both of our spouses do not have our last names. Now, firstly, shout out to my wife, Dina, who we just had her 6-year anniversary last week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But we had a deal that she did not change it because it's hers, and she's not getting rid of her last name. So is there a same deal, or she just hasn't done it yet?
There's a lot of work in changing your last name. And it's something where like initially it was like, yeah, we'll go ahead and do this. And we got married, we came back, we had to start opening the brewery, and then eventually it was just like, no. But I don't know. And then also too, I mean, there's always going to be things like, behind the scenes of stuff. But ultimately, one of the coolest things is, so Chrissy's grandmother, Charlotte Penny, she was a really awesome person and a huge role model to Chrissy and really took care of her. And I think there's a lot to be carrying that name as well. And some of the things that she wants to do is things to make her grandmother proud. And so it makes me really happy when I see those moments that she feels like she is doing her grandmother proud, or things where her grandma did it, she might not realize she did it. And I'm like, oh, okay, Charla. She's like, what? And I'm like your grandma. And you can just see her like kind of blush a little bit. It's like, cool. Yeah. Like, I love those moments.
Nice. Yeah. I think with my wife, it's kind of the same. That I'm glad she kept it.
Wendy, what's your final question?
So I am coming to visit your brewery this week. I'm not actually, we're pretending. That would be awesome if I was. What beer should I try while I'm there?
This week, like as in like next week, or like,
so yeah, this show
next week.
This show comes out on Saturday. So pretend like somebody's listening to it Monday and they're flying out there.
If you were coming in, I would highly recommend you try the release that we have this week called Tiny Umbrellas. It's basically a hazy IPA that's somewhat of a tiki style, but it literally tastes like you're drinking a tiki cocktail. And spoken from experience, it's a fun time to go a marathon on them. But other than that, I would always highly recommend everybody have a Party Boy. It's also really fun if you get it in a can, because this one is a little harder
to see. That was what got our
but
attention.
Well, actually, if you come to the brewery, we serve it off of a Lucre faucet on a side pull, and it's awesome. But if you get it in the can, you can shotgun it right there, and it's a good time. There's a little bang emoji, and in Japanese, in hiragana, it says "insert key here." Um, so yeah, it's a fun beer. And then it's basically this is the front of the label. Yeah. Um, Now I'm like covered in tape and update. I'm so sorry. This is a little bit more scattered. I'm just gonna do that.
Well, for those of you that are listening to the show, obviously you can check us out on our YouTube page, youtube.com/BetterOnDraft to see all those labels. My final question first, I have a statement. We made the suggestion to Kim Brisson Lutz over at Maui Brewing, and I feel like maybe this is a great time for a collaboration. Here in Michigan, we had a beer up in Right Brain Brewing called Magnalista Pig Porter, which was a porter made with Magnalista pig heads and bones. Now, Hawaii is known for their pork delicacy, also known as Spam. I would love for you guys to make a collaboration, Maui Hana Koa, Spam Porter. Come on. You're
I still have a bottle.
Did I break him? I don't know. I feel like
just really thinking about me going to Kim and literally being like, "Hey Kim, you want to throw Spam into the kettle?" Just see.
Here's the thing: is it won't be the first time she's heard it. I made this suggestion to her when she was on the show a month and a half ago. So now that we have two Hawaiian brewers on here, you guys can collab. I feel like this is a winning formula. And I mean, it did win them a gold medal at GABF for best experimental beer. So maybe, I mean, this was 11 years ago and the craft beer industry was a lot different 11 years ago, but I feel like you guys could do something there. Number two, and this is something that I'm canceling my original question to ask you because the way your video is, again, youtube.com/BetterOnDraft, or if you're listening live, twitch.tv/BetterOnDraft, you have the Rat Magnet shirt on.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you tell me from your experience why you purchased that shirt?
The whole industry right now, I think, is a lot better off because this happened. It's funny how somebody doing something without any expectations created an entire reckoning. I mean, some of the people that were mentioned, I've had experiences with, and one of which, like, I even tried talking to about this stuff and just realized this is going to go nowhere. And I just don't want to support those types of people. And I love what all of this stands for. And I think it's hard too, because during that time frame, you got like Altogether was like the first one that really started a lot of just these initiative beers amongst breweries, like at a scale that hadn't really been seen before. And, this is definitely one of those initiative beers where you have to provide a code of conduct. You have to stand by what you're going to do. This isn't just, like putting a rainbow up for your icon because it's Pride Month. It's like, no, you have to hold yourself to these rules. And, we built this place because we wanted our staff to feel that they're appreciated and that they're more than just a worker here. Like we try to check in with them as much as we can. And also if somebody's being an asshole, they don't get to be an asshole. Like it's a mutual business exchange. So if people aren't behaving, then they don't get to have what we're making. That's just the bottom line. And I think there's been a perpetuation amongst restaurant industry that it's like the customer gets to do whatever they want. They can cry and complain like a child and get it. And I'm like, fuck that. That sucked when I was doing it. So we're not going to do that here. And it's kind of been working. It's weird what happens when you actually treat people like adults.
It's interesting that you bring up. No. That's the kind of answer that we're looking for. I worked in restaurant point of sale, so I was in restaurants all over the country for a good 6 years, and learning that the customer is not always right. Is something that I think a lot of us had to, as industry people, learn and adjust, because you never wanted confrontation, but sooner or later you were getting abused to the point where you shouldn't have to take it. And the managers were always trying to be the best of good and evil, making everyone happy, appeasing the customer while they're there and then appeasing the employee later. Sooner or later, there's no reason to appease the customer.
Yeah.
So, Hana Koa, are you guys, where can we find you guys? Are you guys Hawaii only? Do you guys distro? Are you through Tavor? Where can we get it? Or do we have to come all the way to Hawaii and, to see you guys?
You guys won't have to come to Hawaii. I'll send out this beer, but
I'm referring to the rest of the
the rest of everybody, they're probably going to have to come out to Oahu. We don't distribute beyond this island, but we are in, as far as like package to go product, we're also in a bunch of different smaller liquor stores and bottle shops. We're in a bunch of different restaurants out here as well. And then if anybody does want to come down and check out the brewery, it's definitely a fun experience. It's a cool atmosphere. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend for people. But
what about bigger festivals? Beers Without Beards. Obviously, you guys were in Portland, Maine. Should we see you maybe at Extreme Beer Fest or CBC?
If we get invited to go to those things, there are chances that we'll go. I mean, it's part of, we just recently did a tap takeover at some Bay Area accounts in September, and we might be trying to do something like that in Seattle. Honestly, part of our business model too has been doing like a band on tour, so to speak. So we go to a city, do collabs, do tap takeovers, and then, sort of dip out. And it's like, hey, if you haven't heard of us, here's this, and opportunities to learn and opportunities to get to meet people too. So yeah.
Well, that will do it for this episode 304 of the Better on Draft podcast. Of course, we are on all the social medias, Better on Draft, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, and Untapped. No matter what you think of your beer, we think it's Better on Draft. Have a good night.
Ahuiho.